Dark Discoveries is a podcast that dives into the darker corners of history, mystery, and the downright bizarre. We discuss real events that may include graphic details, adult themes, and strong language, not suitable for all ages. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
We're here to inform, entertain, and maybe make you laugh nervously in public, but never to glorify criminals or make light of victims. Our research is thorough, but hey, we're not perfect.
We don't claim to be historians, so if we get something slightly off, blame Jackie. All opinions are our own, and sometimes even those are questionable. Welcome back to Dark Discoveries. I'm your host, Dustin.
And I'm Jimbo.
It's good to know that you finally listened to me and let me blame Jackie on this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, she's not here to defend herself. So
you heard the intro. You know, it's another doozy we have for you on Gangsters and some Gunmen. So tonight, we're going to talk about some untold or unknown, gangsters and gunmen, often overshadowed figures on the American criminal underworld. We're not just dipping our toes. We're plunging headfirst into the roaring, lawless, and utterly captivating 1930s. An era of unprecedented economic hardship, speakeasies, and yes, the startling rise of audacious bank robberies that captivated and terrified the nation. And at the very heart was one of the most infamous gangs of that tumultuous time. Was a man often overshadowed by his more charismatic and notorious associates. Tonight, I am talking about Homer Van Meter.
Oh,
not Homer Simpson.
Sorry.
So a lot of these guys we're going to talk about, there isn't a lot of information out there. Obviously, Homer Van Meter was part of the Dillinger gang. So we know a lot about John. We know a lot about, guys like Al Capone, but some of these other guys don't really get talked about a whole lot. Mm-hmm. Search your podcast feeds, and you're probably not going to bring up a lot of results on these guys. So I think it's important to kind of talk about these guys, not necessarily give them credit, but at least teach the history of what went on, who the people were. And I know a lot of these gangsters, some families like the great nephews of like John Dillinger, they love the fact that, John was their relative. They like to talk about him, the positive, countless awesome artifacts. But then you get guys like Babyface Nelson, from what they were telling me, his family just despised him. Anything related to him, they threw away, they burnt, they want nothing to do with remembering that part of history. A lot of these people helped shape the nation to what it is now, good or bad, with the FBI and law enforcement and different things. So different practices and procedure for places. So why not tell their story? Because they did have an impact on this country. So without further ado, born in Fort Wayne, Indiana in 1905, Homer Van Meter's trajectory towards a life of crime seemed almost predetermined. He wasn't a product of the Great Depression. Swept into desperation, his criminal inclinations surfaced far earlier. Even as a teenager, he was racking up arrests, not for petty mischief, but more serious offenses like larceny, bank robbery. By the tender age of 17, he was already behind bars serving time in various correctional facilities. One of the most significant of these was the Pendleton Reformatory in Pendleton, Indiana, a grim institution notorious for being less of a place about rehabilitation and more about finishing school for hardened criminals. Con college, that's what we like to call it. It was within these cold, unforgiving walls, amidst the harsh realities of prison life, that Van Meter honed his survival skills, developed a deep-seated distrust for authority, and crucially forged connections. These were not just connections, though. They were bonds with men who would later become some of the most feared names in America. Men like John Hamilton, handsome Harry Pierpont, and even a young John Dillinger himself. These were the formative years where a delinquent transformed into a dangerous, hardened criminal, ready to make his mark on the criminal landscape. While Van Meter was undoubtedly a career criminal in his own right, his name became linked with a man who would be dubbed the FBI's first public enemy number one, John Dillinger. These paths crossed in prison, truly converging and exploded onto a national scene after Dillinger's almost cinematic escape from Crown Point Jail in March of 1934. It was a feat of audacity that shocked the nation, and suddenly, Dillinger needed a crew. Van Meter, along with the always volatile Lester Babyface Nelson and loyal Tommy Carroll, joined forces with Dillinger. It wasn't just a random assembly. These were hardened men, fresh from prison or already deep in the criminal lifestyle, all sharing a common enemy, the law. Together, they formed a core group that would terrorize banks and law enforcement agencies across the Midwest in a whirlwind of violence and daring heists. I do want to kind of put it out there. I'm pretty sure that John had reservations with having Babyface Nelson in the gang. You know, you're getting laid into stuff. You're losing people. I'm not really hitting these guys in any order of, their life when they joined, when they went out. We're going to just tell their stories. Probably should do a little bit more research and put it in a little bit better order, but just get guys I want to talk about. So, but Babyface Nelson, he was a wild card.
I really like Babyface Nelson, though. I love reading about him.
I'm going to try to do Babyface Nelson towards the end of this series, of the Dillinger gang. But Justin Rimmel of Mysterious Circumstances knocked it out of the park. I have to forget everything I heard in that podcast episodes, that series, and try to do it on my own because it was just so well done. I'd love to copy and take his work, but I respect him a little bit too much for that. But the Dillinger gang, for the most part, they weren't really trying to shoot people. They tried not to be violent, and for the most part, they weren't. So just because you're robbing banks, you weren't always a hardened murderer. You were just, looking to get a buck. Like we said, it's the Great Depression. Banks are taking farms, taking, homesteads. People are losing everything. Banks are closing up. So it's a dire time. And when we talked about the last episode with, who do you have? William Dalton.
No, that's who I'm talking about this time. Bill Doolin.
Bill Doolin, sorry. If you'd have kept your notes in front of you, I would have remembered. Back in that time, before the Depression, people were against, they weren't having it with bank robbers. But those same people, they've lost everything. They're kind of rooting for the underdog. So keep that in mind as we go through these next, episodes that we're going to be dropping with these. Van Meter was more of a hanger-on or a simple driver. He was a ruthless enforcer, the man with a reputation for his hair trigger, which we're back to, I don't know how much of that's always right. So I'm still going to go on a limb that Dillinger himself never killed nobody. Some guys got shot and killed, and unfortunately, some of these bank robberies. Man, it's somebody else's money. Don't die over it. That still goes today. You work retail, do this. Don't die for somebody else's money. There's insurance on that. Like I said, he had a reputation for a hair trigger temper and an even quicker hand to his weapon. While Dillinger was the charismatic leader, the meticulous strategist who planned all the robberies, Van Meter was the unyielding muscle, the man who ensured their daring heist went according to plan. often with a terrifying, violent edge. Witnesses from various bank robberies often describe Van Meter as the most menacing of the gang. Quick to shout out orders, quicker to use his gun to intimidate. If necessary, he would often wound people. He participated in several of the most audacious, bloody bank robberies. Think of the First National Bank in Mason City, Iowa in March of 1934. The gang would escape with a staggering $52,000, or the Merchants National Bank in South Bend in May of 1934, the robbery that turned into a chaotic shootout, leaving one police officer dead, several bystanders wounded. Van Meter was reportedly deeply involved in the violent exchanges in both of these events. You got to remember, too, did the police shoot anybody? You know, did the bank robber shoot people? Was it sensationalism? A lot of stuff going on that time. And there was even accounts where banks claimed to be robbed by people that weren't there. So we've already alluded to that in the previous episode. But Van Meter, like I said, you know, he was the one that they're going to put the blame on that. So he was the one that would tell the tellers to move faster. He would whip out his pistol while waiting. He would fire warning shots just inches from the customers' heads. His presence alone was often enough to incite terror. The public starved for excitement during the bleak depression. It was a morbid fascination by the gang's exploits that really drew people in. Some people saw them as modern-day Robin Hoods, rebel against the oppressive system. Even if their actions clearly benefited themselves, the people were on their side. But law enforcement, particularly the newly empowered Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, which at that time I think was just the Bureau, though, was under the fist of J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover saw them as a grave threat to national order. The term public enemy was coined for men like John Dillinger, Homer Van Meter. Eddie Van Meter lives in Indianapolis and drives race cars, so that's why that name's in my head. Handsome Harry Pierpont. There's so many guys that, you know, was behind that public enemy term. Van Meter, like the rest of the gang, was constantly on the run, living life defined by paranoia, cheap disguises, and the ever pursuit of betrayal or ambush. They changed cars frequently, moved from hideout to hideout, and trust was almost non-existent outside of their immediate circle. The pressure was immense, leading to frayed nerves and increased violence. In July of 1934, Van Meter had a dramatic, life-altering close call. He was with John Dillinger at the Biograph Theater in Chicago on that sweltering Sunday evening of July 22nd. As Dillinger emerged from the movie theater, famously accompanied by the Lady in Red, which we would find out was probably orange. Just the lights and the sensational, Lady in Red sounds better than the Lady in Orange. I blame Little Red Riding Hood. Anna Sage. Federal agents would swarm him. The moment shots rang out, sealing Dillinger's faith.
Yeah, it did. Well, it sealed that too.
He had a come to Jesus moment there. Van Meter would incredibly manage to slip away into the chaos and through the surprise crowd. It was a testament to his street smarts, his instinct for survival, perhaps the stroke of pure dumb luck. Even as he vanished into the Chicago night, leaving Dillinger's body on the pavement, his own luck was rapidly running out. The FBI intensified their dragnet, now even more determined to eliminate the remaining members of the gang. Dramatic pause. Just over a month after the curtain fell on Homer Van Meter's violent life, I don't know if I'm missing something. I feel like I'm missing something. On August 23rd, 1934, he was back in St. Paul, Minnesota, where the gang often found refuge. Thanks to corrupt local officials, Van Meter's increasingly was increasingly isolated and desperate. He was reported trying to arrange for plastic surgery to alter his appearance, a common practice for outlaws of the time. Didn't always really work well, but his movements had been observed. Federal agents, along with local police from St. Paul, had been tipped off possibly by informants of even a jealous rival. Informants were a rival. They had him cornered in an alley near his apartment at 287 Marion Street. When confronted, Van Meters, true to his nature, didn't surrender. He reportedly attempted to draw his weapon and fight his way out. A final defiant act against the law he had so long defied. But he was no match for the overwhelming force. A volley of shots erupted, and Homer Van Meter was gunned down, riddled with bullets. Reports slightly vary on the exact sequence of events, some suggesting he was attempting to retrieve a weapon from a car. Others say he simply reached for his pocket. Regardless, the outcome was distinctive. He died violently just as he had lived. His body was found with a Colt 38 automatic and a 45 automatic pistol, along with about $2,400 in cash, which during the Great Depression was quite a bit of change.
Yeah.
A testament to his life of crime right up to the final breath. But these guys had to carry big amounts of money. You know, you're paying off police officers. You have to buy, safe houses. You're going to pay more to do that. So you would think a huge score, you'd be done. But unfortunately, the life of a criminal, just the money just keeps racking up. Homer Van Meter might not command the same recognition as the flamboyant John Dillinger or the terrifying babyface Nelson or even the notorious Bonnie and Clyde. His story isn't romanticized in the same way, perhaps because his role was less about charismatic leadership and more about brutal, efficient enforcement. But his role in the notorious Dillinger Gang's crime spree was utterly invaluable and undeniable. He was critical, a deadly clog,
like you did in my toilet earlier.
cog in the machine. A brutal, effective criminal who contributed significantly to the gang's short but in fact impactful reign of terror. What happens with your toilet and me is between me and your toilet, not for the listeners of this podcast. His life and death are a stark, unflinching reminder of the dangerous and desperate times of the Public Enemy era. He represents the underbelly of the romanticized period, the cold, hard reality, the violence and fear accompanied the dark, daring bank robberies. While Dillinger became a folk hero to some, Van Meter remained closer to the architect of the ruthless thug, a necessary, terrifying component of a gang that captured the nation's imagination, even as it instilled fear. Words are getting a little tough here. His story, though often overlooked, is an integral understanding to the scope of the era and the men, for better or worse. He was a true outlaw to the very bitter, bloody end. So, interesting little side note. He is buried up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We took a little trip up to one of Rimmel's live shows, not Jimbo, but me. And we had the pleasure of doing an investigation after a live show with Jerry Pauly of Hillbilly Horror Stories and Justin Rimmel, who brought some nice homemade wine with him. Had a good night, and I was like, somehow I have to attach myself to Justin because I am a skeptic. I don't really believe in the ghost stuff too much. I got to see it to believe it. So about midway through the night, I finally got linked up with him, got away from the group I was with, and we went to the embalming room. So the Bell Mansion was a funeral home for a long time, and that's where he was embalmed. He's buried not real far from there. And I remember, I'm trying to, gauge how this spirit box stuff works and if I really believe it. And they bring up John Dillinger's name and they're asking Van Meter questions. And we're not getting a whole lot. I'm like, this is a waste of time. And then, were you friends with John Dillinger? And clear as day, hand on the Bible, we heard a response. It was all for nothing. You know, the spirit box, if you're not familiar, it supposedly, if you believe in it, it cycles through radio stations and it's able to have the spirit, I guess in a nutshell, pick out certain things through random stations. I've played with them a little bit. Didn't really believe a whole lot of what I was, seeing. You get some nights you get nothing. Some nights you get something. So is it really something? But that came in so clear and was one of the only really times I really believe that we may be in the same room as his spirit. So, was a fun night, was crazy. I need to talk to Justin because he went back later because they stayed the night. We didn't see what he had come out of there, but I know the Bell Mansion is selling. They won't be doing investigations much longer. So if you hear this and you're interested and it's still going on, by all means, check it out.
Are you sure it was a spirit, or was it the spirits that you guys had been drinking affecting your hearing of the spirits?
I had a sinus infection, so I only had a sip of the homemade wine. So I was definitely stone cold sober. But there was a few things. It's definitely it's a huge, huge place. Definitely, at least if you can, check it out. I want to go back before it's over, but I think we're running out of time on the investigations for the Bell Mansion.
All right, Justin, well done. Not Justin. Well, Justin does do it well.
Man, right? You just insulted him.
I was going to say,
it's okay.
I take you from the high of Justin to the low of thank you, Dustin. So,
I'm pretty sure he's not listening, so it's okay.
Yeah, so we're going to travel back in time now when the American frontier was still raw and untamed and deadly. A time when lawmen walked with rifles and outlaws rode like ghosts across the plains. In this twilight of the Wild West, one name still stirs both infamy and intrigue. William Marion Dalton, otherwise known as Bill Dalton.
Bloody Bill Dalton.
He was born into a family that would become synonymous with danger. He rode with his brothers, schemed with desperados, and eventually carved his own bloody legend into the dust. Bill Dalton wasn't just another outlaw. He was a man caught between politics, family loyalty, and a hunger for something bigger than law and order could ever offer.
A big old cheeseburger? Or?
So saddle up, Dustin. Once again, this is the rise and violent fall of Bill Dalton.
Wait a minute. I don't have my riding pants on. I don't want to get chafed.
Don't start chafing again. He was the outlaw politician who built his own gang and died trying to outrun the law. William Marion Dalton was born on May 12th, 1863 in Cass County, Missouri, into a family already drifting towards the outlaw trail.
Are you sure it's Missouri and not Missouri?
Missouri.
I've heard people from Missouri call it Missouri.
Well, I've heard people call it misery too, but I'm not going to call it that too, right?
Where are you from? I'm from St. Louis, Missouri.
His brothers. These are his brothers' names. You ready? So you had Bob. So Bob Dalton. You had Emmett Dalton. And you had Grot. G-R-A-T. Grot Dalton. It sounds like a hot dog festival. Give me one of them Grot Daltons.
I don't think they were really looking forward to that third kid.
He might be the older one from what I could tell. So
what do you want? Grot.
But they would later form the infamous Dalton Gang, best known for their spectacular and deadly attempt to rob two banks, which we talked about last episode.
Two banks one time.
Simultaneously in Coffeyville, Kansas. But Bill was different. For most of his early life, he seemed like the respectable one of the family. In fact, he entered politics in California, serving as a state legislator in the 1890s.
So wait a minute. You're telling me they didn't think he was a criminal when he joined? Aren't all politicians criminals?
Crooks. Usually.
Should have known to watch this guy from the start then.
But by all accounts, he was intelligent, well-spoken, and charming. He was a natural leader. But don't let the coat and tie fool you there, Dustin. The Dalton name had weight, and Bill carried that weight with him, even while holding office. Because at night, away from the chamber floors and legislative bills, he was forging ties to the criminal underworld that would soon consume him. After his brothers turned to robberies and violence, Bill became their behind-the-scenes man. He was suspected of helping plan the gang's train heist and using his political influence to shield them from the law.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me he joined politics just to keep his family out of trouble?
Well, I don't think just to keep him out of trouble. That came as an added bonus.
It's a bonus?
Right. But everything changed on October 5th, 1892, when the Coffeyville robbery ended in a bloodbath. Bob and Grot were gunned down in the streets. So
he didn't get a pardon. I was about to say, you get a pardon, and you get a pardon, and you get a...
Emmett survived, but just barely. He was sentenced to life in prison. For most men, that kind of loss would bring an end to the crime. But for Bill, it only ignited something darker inside of him. The death of his brothers became a turning point. He left politics. He left California.
That was a pretty good choice.
And by 1893, he had picked up a rifle and returned to the outlaw trail full force, not just to avenge his family, but to replace them. In Indian Territory, what we now call Oklahoma, Bill teamed up with a rising outlaw named Bill Doolin, who we just talked about last episode.
Oh, Bill Doolin.
Together, they formed a new gang, the Doolin-Dalton Gang, also known as the Wild Bunch. They weren't just a collection of thugs. They were most dangerous outlaws in the country. The gang included killers like Tulsa Jack, Bitter Creek Newcomb, Arkansas Tom, and Little Bill Rattler. And under Doolin and Dalton's joint leadership, they launched a reign of terror across the Southwest.
Who's the little guy again?
Little Bill Rattler?
I wonder if he was like little Jimmy Dickens. I wonder if he had sequins and flashy clothes.
Like who?
You don't know who little Jimmy Dickens was?
No, who was it?
Look at it. Like,
so you don't know,
we
so
get
you
done,
can't tell me.
You never watched the Grand Ole Opry and seen little Jimmy Dickens in his sequence outfits and everything? Don't act like you did. Google
I'm talking about the Grand Ole Opry I used to watch a long time ago. Is that like Lawrence Welk?
When you're done, look it up, and then we'll have to see if he dressed flashy to make up for being little.
I'm not wasting my data on something stupid like that.
Oh, come on.
So their targets, trains and banks mostly. On September 1st, 1893, the Wild Bunch struck a Santa Fe train at Wharton, Oklahoma. It was a well-executed hit. The gang made off with tens of thousands of dollars in loot. That same year, they robbed banks in Perry, Kingfisher, and Guthrie, leaving empty vaults and dead lawmen in their wake. So these guys aren't messing around.
No, and you start to get the law on you a lot more when people start to end up dead.
Right. So Bill Dalton, the politician turned pistolero, was now fully committed to the outlaw life. He was respected among the gang for his intellect, his nerve, and his ability to stay calm during the chaos. And for a while, it seemed like the law couldn't touch him. But things wouldn't stay that way. Once again, the U.S. Marshals started closing in. By late 1894, the Doolin-Dalton gang was unraveling. Members were dying in shootouts. Some were captured. Others turned on each other. Bill Doolin wanted to lie low and rebuild. But Bill Dalton, he had other plans. He left the Wild Bunch and formed his own gang, the Dalton Gang Reborn. I like that he just names it the Reborn.
So did he give it that name, or did like the newspapers? Because that's like a movie.
As the newspapers dubbed it, you didn't let me finish the line.
It sounds like a dang California movie.
Right. It wasn't a large crew, but it was ruthless. He wanted to do what Bob and Grot had failed to accomplish, pull off a massive score and escape forever. So they're just trying to get enough to get out of there for good. On May 23rd, 1894, Dalton and his new gang rode into Longview, Texas. It was high noon when they hit both the First National Bank and Alexander and Gibbs Bank simultaneously. Sound familiar? Should be, because it's the second time they've tried something like this. Yes.
If you fail once, try and try again.
It was a mirror of the Coffeyville plan, but once again, it went wrong. The townspeople and lawmen fired back fast. A massive shootout erupted in the streets. One gang member was killed, another wounded. Civilians and officers fell too. Bill Dalton.
Once again, if he would have just waited and perfected the lamb method,
he
maybe would have had enough people to pull this off.
Bill Dalton barely escaped with his life, but now he was a marked man with a bounty on his head and a trail of blood behind him. He rode fast, but not fast enough. On June 8th, 1894, just 2 weeks after the Longview robbery, a posse of lawmen surrounded a farmhouse near Elk Indian Territory where Dalton was hiding out. According to reports, he attempted to flee out the back door, but before he could get clear, he was shot down. One bullet hit him in the chest, another in the back. He died there on the ground. His gun never fired. He was only 31 years old. So once again,
not a very long life expectancy.
His body, again, was brought into town, photographed, and displayed like a trophy, as we talked about last episode, just like his brothers before him. The message was clear. The age of the outlaw was ending. But Bill Dalton's legacy is far more complex than a corpse and a crime spree. He was a lawmaker who became lawless, a brother who couldn't let go of the past, a man who tried to outwit death and found it waiting for him just the same. In time, his story blended with legend. Country songs were written, westerns made. His name became a fixture in the mythos of the American West. But what remains most fascinating about Bill Dalton isn't just the violence or the robberies. It's the duality. He was the outlaw with a pen in one hand and a revolver in the other, a man torn between the law he once served and the bloodline he couldn't escape. So thank you for joining us on this ride through the forgotten life of William Marion Bill Dalton. If you've enjoyed tonight's episode of Dark Discoveries, Gangsters and Gunmen, leave us a review, share the show with a friend, and subscribe for more true tales from the darker chapters of history.
And if you have a suggestion, darkdiscoverieспod@gmail.com, because some point we're going to need some viewer input.
I doubt it. I've seen your binders, Dustin,
on who we should talk about next.
Right.
Bonus points if we already have them in the binder.
So this has been Dark Discoveries, where the deeper you dive,
the darker it gets.